Story 1. It is the constant mental weight. Every decision becomes a calculation. Groceries or medicine, bus fare or saving for rent. It is the exhaustion of surviving, not living. It is watching opportunities pass because you cannot afford to reach for them. It is the shame you feel for things that are not your fault and the silence you carry because society often blames the poor for their own poverty. It is not just what you do not have. It is what you are made to believe you will never deserve. Story 2. Being patronized by out-of-touch billionaires who offer absolutely useless tips that are of no use to anyone, advising you to be more frugal with your money and to cancel your monthly £5.99 Netflix subscription. Story 3. The constant feeling of being behind, no matter how hard you try, feels like being stuck on a hamster wheel, always running but never getting anywhere. Even small setbacks can feel as though they have completely derailed your progress. Story 4. Not being able to live the best life you have always dreamed of. Not being able to afford what you want, and having no freedom can be challenging. You have to work hard to survive. Story 5. Not being able to go to the store and buy a snack or go out for lunch with friends. Just the little things like that. Story 6. How expensive it is. Genuinely being poor costs so much because buying cheaper means you need to replace items more frequently, leading to higher overall spending. Bank fees take away what little money you have left, causing you to lose part of your paycheck before it even arrives, which can lead to overdraft again and again. Story 7. The worst part of being poor isn't just the lack of money. It's carrying the same worn-out school bag for 3 years and pretending to love it. It's acting like you're not hungry during lunch breaks because you didn't bring any food. It's watching your parents fall sick and realizing you don't have enough money for tests. It's saying maybe next time to every trip, birthday, or movie plan until your friends stop asking. It's feeling guilty for needing things. It's growing up too fast because you didn't have the luxury to be a child. That's what poverty steals from you quietly, every day. Not just material possessions, but also joy, dignity, and the right to dream without guilt. At least that's what poverty did to me. Story 8. The stress is overwhelming. In the case of generational poverty, it is heartbreaking to watch family members suffer and die from the stress, as many in my family passed away in their 40s to 60s. It is frustrating to hear wealthy individuals offer disconnected advice. It is disheartening to hear wealthy individuals blame you or suggest that you are lying about your experiences. It is difficult to watch wealthy individuals thrive, especially knowing that everyone deserves the opportunity to succeed. Story 9. I grew up poor and lived in an old, poorly maintained single-wide trailer. In winter, the pipes would freeze if you didn't let water trickle. The floors in the bathroom were rotted, so you had to walk in specific spots. The worst part as a 10 to 14-year-old was the embarrassment of having my classmates, friends, or even people on the bus know I lived there. I took extreme measures to keep that a secret for as long as I could. Very few people knew I lived there. When I turned 14, my dad bought some land, and we started building a house. It took around 2 years to finally finish it, and when I was 16, I began having friends over. It was life-changing, and I never want my kids to experience that. Story 10. When I was poor as a child, I realized we were different from others, even our neighbors a few houses down the street. I didn't ask for things because I knew we couldn't afford them. As a young adult raising a family, the constant pressure and feeling of unease became overwhelming. It was a persistent stress. I'm not poor anymore, but I am very careful with my finances. The challenges we face in youth can help build character and positive traits later in life. Story 11. Not being able to charge your phone, eat a salad, or connect your secondhand continuous positive airway pressure device so you can sleep without worrying about theft, but also perhaps not die tonight. I'm sorry, I just refreshed and I thought the question was about being poor, not just broke. In the last 3 days, I collected cans to pay for a bus ticket to donate plasma, to buy a safety vest, to work a day job demoing an apartment, to earn some cash to see a doctor about my split toe, which was caused by clearing debris from a torn-down hospital. I used the money from that to pay rent at a house where several people are nodding off every day. But I still managed to buy my kids a reminder that their dad still loves them and that everything will get better, but not now. Maybe soon they can have their dad back, because this next opportunity will get me on my feet. I need to go grab some expired food out of the dumpster because I'm sorry. It's a 2-year-old game, but it's the best I can do. I am so sad, but I get up every day and give all my energy, and I just keep losing. Maybe this next chance will allow me to provide a safe home for you. Perhaps this next one will be different, and you won't have to worry about whether I can see your next game. Story 12. Not being able to afford medical treatment is a problem. Yes, we have the National Health Service, but it does not cover many treatments that could positively impact people's lives, and even when it does, the waiting lists are excessively long. It is almost impossible to find an NHS dentist, and even if you are fortunate enough to register somewhere, you may never get an appointment. They are certainly not providing cosmetic dental procedures. They will address your pain, and that is all. There are even talks dedicated to the substantial impact that poor dental health can have on our lives. Individuals who are significantly overweight or those who have worked hard to lose a considerable amount of weight would benefit greatly from procedures such as tummy tucks and skin removal. We refer to these as elective surgeries and do not cover them under the NHS, even though psychologists will tell you how much impact carrying excess weight or having loose skin can have on someone's mental health. It seems we would rather prescribe antidepressants until their health deteriorates than address the underlying issues related to weight and skin. This situation can ruin a person's life, and often, they have reached this point due to mental health challenges. If someone is 200 pounds overweight, it is not because they are in good mental health. The wealthy only fund the healthcare system enough to maintain their workforce's capability to work. That is the unfortunate reality. We do not have a healthcare system designed to help you be your best self. Story 13. Honestly, wealthier people. We make do with what little we have. Then someone affluent arrives to inform me how difficult my situation is. Story 14. The lack of freedom in almost all aspects is significant. I once heard it expressed well. You're only as free as you can afford. Story 15. Having to decide what is more important when everything is important is challenging. It feels like choosing between paying school fees, the electricity bill, buying groceries, or paying for medical treatments. As a child, I spent countless days being punished by teachers because my parents did not pay the fee on time or did not buy the new books for the school year, or we did not have the proper uniform. They thought my parents were just irresponsible, believing that punishing me would somehow motivate them. However, they did not know we were sitting at home without electricity for weeks, or sometimes without cooking gas. They did not know we were sleeping in hot weather without fans, using oil lamps for light in the evenings, or that my mother was cooking our meals on a stove made of burning wood. As a kid, I thought this was normal and that it happened in every home. As an adult, I now understand the truth. Story 16. The feeling of constantly working but not gaining or being able to save much is overwhelming. It seems like I am never going to get ahead or even catch up. I wouldn't say I am poor. I just feel like I'm not making any progress, despite drastically cutting back. Story 17. The moment you think you're finally getting yourself together, something worse comes out of nowhere. A flat tire, an overdraft, and rent due all within the span of a week. Story 18. It is difficult to not always have money on your mind. At certain times, it feels impossible to think about anything else. Story 19. The lack of food and the expectation to perform as well as others while receiving far less is challenging. Story 20. Lack of access to essential items due to insufficient funds. Some individuals are forced to choose between taking their full medication and paying rent. Story 21. It's costly to look good, so I don't. My clothes are clean, and I take care of myself, but my nails aren't done. My hair isn't dyed. My skincare routine consists of a moisturizer that costs $10 and a cleanser that costs $7. I can't afford an elaborate beauty routine or multiple layers of makeup. Story 22. The boredom feels like I am always just passing time as cheaply as possible until the next payday. I often read, scroll through social media, relax in the yard, or watch videos because doing enjoyable activities risks me spending over $100 that I don't have. I have tried several things that started out inexpensive but ended up costing $500. This scares me from venturing far from home or starting projects when one wrong step can lead to financial disaster. Story 23. The loss of health due to stress, poor food options, and hazardous housing such as asbestos, lead, and mold. Story 24. Health is deteriorating, and I cannot afford to test or address the issues, even though I know something is wrong. The irony is striking. Last week, I went 3 days without eating, and the stress made me crave alcohol, but I could not afford it. I typically do not drink much. Story 25. I have to resort to unreliable imported or hidden drugs and self-diagnose my mental health issues because I don't have health care. And seeing a therapist costs a month's worth of money. Story 26. Not knowing if a surprise bill will arrive and deplete the $30 in my account is stressful. I am uncertain if I can spend $10 on a shirt without regretting it later. My current situation is also troubling. I wonder if I should have a snack now or save it for work this week if I cannot afford to pack a lunch. Story 27. Having people try to convince you that being poor is better than being rich. Money can't buy happiness. Well, poverty doesn't provide anything. Anyone who disagrees can send me all their money, and we'll see who's happier at the end of the day. Story 28. Being poor is expensive. A wealthy person can simply buy a home for a certain amount of money. For someone who is not wealthy and needs to finance a mortgage, that house ends up being 3 times more expensive. Renting can cost even more over a lifetime. Can't afford regular dental checks and cleanings? Just wait until you need a root canal and pay for that. Can't afford a $300 pair of boots to last you 10 years? Pay $100 per year for cheaper boots that fall apart. Can't afford a new refrigerator but need one to survive? Enter into a rent-to-own agreement and pay $3,000 for an $800 refrigerator. Story 29. The advice: your income is £800, your rent is £900, and the suggestion is to save £1 per month by brewing your own dish soap from dandelion stems or something similar. When you call a company to explain that you cannot pay their bill, they ask, "What can you afford to pay immediately?" As if you were not truthful about your financial situation, or as if their definition of having no money includes possessing some funds. Story 30. Being overweight is a challenge. While it is still possible to lose weight, living in an area with limited access to healthy food, where nutritious options are 3 times more expensive than snacks like chips or candy, is frustrating and promotes unhealthy eating habits. Story 31. Missing out on creating memories that require a significant amount of money to experience in life, such as traveling, hosting a party, attending a concert, purchasing merchandise, engaging in unique hobbies, and acquiring rare ingredients to enhance your cooking, leads to a diminished quality of life. Story 32. Cheap food usually has very little nutritional value and is often high in sodium, chemicals, and preservatives. Story 33. Your hierarchy of needs and personal development can only progress if you stop feeling like you are chasing nothing. Eventually, you may reach an age where you realize that success may not be attainable and that you could feel trapped, serving the interests of wealthy individuals who lack concern for your well-being, ultimately leading to being forgotten. Story 34. People treat it as a failure of character or morals. The way Americans treat their homeless is despicable. People on the street act as if they have leprosy or that they are going to attack them. The homeless should be afraid of you. Statistically, they are far more likely to be attacked by you than you are by them. Story 35. Constant uncertainty about the future and whether any actions can be taken to survive it. Story 36. Mommy wrapped the Christmas presents and placed them under the tree and said some of them were for me because Daddy couldn't buy them. I'll never forget that Christmas. I sat up the whole night crying. As a child growing up in difficult circumstances, I tried not to be a burden to my family, but I know my parents had moments like this. Story 37. Being poor and having others, such as a spouse and children, depend on you for financial and other reasons can be challenging. Story 38. No vacation. I'm hungry. I'm not as poor today as I have been, but I am struggling because I lost my job for 2 months. Before that, I was happy despite my financial situation. I could still go out to eat every now and then. I just got 3 part-time jobs, so I think I am going to dig myself out. Story 39. Having to skin and prepare your own food when you hunt it is challenging. Everything else is enjoyable, but I dislike the preparation process. Story 40. An unexpected emergency room visit. It's the worst. It's bad enough that you are barely getting by, but then suddenly, they need $3,000 now. Wasn't the $10,000 my insurance just paid enough? Story 41. Not seeing family or friends, like attending your nephew's soccer game or reconnecting with childhood friends. Story 42. Having to convince yourself that financial hardship builds character every time you check your bank account. Story 43. Arguments with a spouse can be challenging. Being married and raising children is difficult, and added financial stress only increases tension. Deciding how to spend money and questioning every financial decision can be exhausting, wearing you down and straining your relationship. Not many couples come through this unscathed. Story 44. You carefully track every penny you spend because you have to. Even if you want to treat yourself to something like a cup of coffee, it feels like you're exposing yourself to the risk of being in debt. I have been living on oatmeal and protein powder. I also have rice and frozen vegetables. The one positive aspect of this situation is that I am finally losing weight. However, that is mainly because I cannot afford to eat out right now. When I did eat out, that would usually be my only meal for the day, and I would drink as much water as possible to avoid feeling hungry. The hydration strategy works well, and my skin has improved. Story 45. How expensive it is. When I was a child, my parents could only afford to buy me and my sisters the cheapest clothes, shoes, and school bags, which would wear out quickly and need replacing sooner. They never had enough disposable income at one time to buy the more durable, higher quality brands that cost more initially but needed replacing less. Story 46. Choosing between life-saving medication and food is sometimes necessary. It's a difficult situation when financial struggles from cancer treatment weigh heavily. Story 47. I was once out of a job for a month and was about to receive welfare. I had $100 to last me that month, and I had to keep the cat fed, so I cut his food from half a can to 1/3 of a can. I always made sure he had food, but I lost a lot of weight that month because I just walked to the store and buy a loaf of store-brand bread and a box of store-brand butter. Not margarine, though. I was low on money but saw no value in buying something that tastes bad if I wouldn't eat it. Then Domino's would have a sale once a week where you could buy a pizza and get one free, so I bought 2 pizzas and kept them in the freezer, having 1 slice per meal when they were cut into 16 pieces. Not ideal, but having to worry about things like that is scary. Planning which bill you can skip while still keeping the lights on, depending on who turns off what for non-payment. The anxiety of it all makes me want to save as much as possible. That's why I started walking for exercise. When I was out of work, I'd walk from my place to the supermarket 2 miles away and then back. I built up such endurance that I was doing it all the time at night because it was cooler outside in the summer. Not knowing if you'll be able to eat and also knowing you can't even afford a muffin at the convenience store as a treat to indulge is tough after a while. Story 48. It's expensive to be impoverished. You buy inexpensive items, and whatever you purchase breaks down more quickly. You end up buying another low-cost item to replace it. Bank overdraft fees are exploitative. If your account goes into overdraft due to direct deposits for bills, you have to pay additional fees. Just avoid taking out extra money that isn't available in your account. Story 49. Because I suffered from malnutrition before the age of 10, I have had lifelong health problems. There is a lot more I want to say, but it is just too painful, so I will stop there. Story 50. The list can go on. I'm not going to mention the worst aspects. However, one of the most painful experiences for me was being left behind by my friends and social circle. I grew up in severe poverty after my mother died, raised by a blind father who had given up on life and spent his days sleeping. I never came home from school to find my father awake and didn't even think to ask him for help when I struggled in school. I enjoyed college immensely and was optimistic when I graduated. However, after I married, my wife was almost immediately diagnosed with a terminal illness that lasted 15 years. As a teacher in New York City making a lower middle-class income, I had to spend every cent on my wife. I relied on churches and community centers for handouts of government cheese. I wore the same pair of shoes for 2 years and endured wet feet every time it rained. Numerous times, social workers advised me to abandon my wife at the hospital and refuse to take her home. Of course, I would never surrender her dignity. Now, back to the main question. All my friends from college and the years following graduation quickly advanced up the economic ladder or achieved solid middle-class status like their parents. I was left behind and could not join them for anything. A restaurant meal or a baseball ticket at Yankee Stadium was completely out of the question. I couldn't even attend a wedding for which I was invited because I didn't own a suit. Once, I embarrassed my host by crossing my leg while sitting on a chair at a barbecue, and people noticed the hole in my sneakers. I couldn't believe that became a big deal. I can go on about the loneliness I felt from being excluded. It's normal to lose contact with friends as you navigate your 20s, but for me, it was completely isolating. I watched from the outside as my friends shared so much while I became just a memory. Story 51. I started poor, but now I am somewhat rich. In life, there is always someone poorer and someone richer. The worst part about being poor is not being able to do almost everything you want to do. You can only manage the bare minimum just to get through the day. Story 52. Even when you have enough to afford groceries, you still experience the mental trauma of feeling inadequate. I experienced food insecurity growing up, and as a successful adult, having to throw away food or not finishing everything on my plate brings up many emotions. Story 53. It depends on the level of poverty being discussed. Are we talking about struggling to support oneself? If so, the inability to provide for oneself is a significant issue. Alternatively, if someone has enough money to get by but not enough to enjoy luxuries, they may find themselves unable to spend money on socializing or doing things for others. Story 54. I cannot afford anything enjoyable, such as movies or dining out. I haven't seen a movie in 12 years or visited a restaurant in many years. I haven't bought new clothes or shoes. I love nice perfume, but I can't afford it. I'm in a constant struggle for survival and face significant challenges with mental health. Story 55. Probably not the worst part, but standing at the supermarket while your card declines is quite uncomfortable. A whole group of people waiting behind you takes note of the card reader. Story 56. Missing out on the enjoyment of life. Being poor requires working multiple jobs, never having the opportunity to relax, and not being able to spend time with friends and family. Story 57. If you grew up poor and all of your friends and family are also struggling, no matter how well you do later in life, it is not easy to enjoy. People around you may still be struggling and feeling down, so you might avoid talking about anything or suggesting activities together. For example, traveling or even buying common items can draw unwanted attention. Just imagining introducing some of my ex-girlfriends, who are now doing well financially, to my family or friends would be incredibly stressful. Dating can be complicated when you have that kind of background, especially if you meet someone who has no understanding of how you used to live or how your family still lives. Story 58. The constant worry is not about choosing what to buy or what not to buy. It is more about the fear of losing your job or facing a major expense that could wipe you out. Story 59. 2 things. 1. You miss out on a lot, constantly worrying about every penny. I'm older, but I remember in college when Metallica played their now famous one-time-only S&M concert, and tickets were $50. It would have been a memory of a lifetime, but $50 in the late 90s was just too much to justify. Those are major things. Minor things like friends going out to eat and spending $5 on a meal felt like too much. Not having a car meant that going somewhere would take about 2.5 hours on public transportation, so sometimes you couldn't just do things. I remember staying up late at night thinking about spending an extra $100 on rent, or if I couldn't sublease my apartment, I would be out thousands. Sleepless nights worrying about trivial matters. I was upset for days when I lost an $8 hamper. I remember crying the whole summer when my bike was stolen, and there was no talk of a replacement. To put it in perspective, now that I have significant financial resources, it's different. My wife got scammed out of $100,000 without telling me. I'm upset with her for betraying my trust, but I'm much less angry about the $100,000 than I was about a $200 bike being stolen when I was younger. Having money allows you to handle issues more easily. If I were still struggling financially, I probably would have considered divorcing my wife, as losing $100,000 would have been devastating. Now, it's just a few extra months of work. Money provides security and simply makes life easier. If my tires are bald, I don't hesitate to get them replaced instead of trying to stretch things out in search of a sale. My diet isn't dictated by grocery coupons anymore. I don't look at prices on menus when I go out for fast food. I no longer have to worry if my boss is difficult. I can just walk away. Being poor is tough, and I'm determined to build wealth so that my children and their children never have to worry about such things the way I did. Story 60. You cannot make financial risks. Nowadays, I will invest $20,000 into a high-probability, high-risk trade. The worst part, from a poor perspective, is that since I am not emotional about the investment because I can afford to lose it, I usually make significant profits like a snowball effect. Then I can do the same with $50,000 and so on. Once you have money, you can take risks that were unimaginable when you had none. Story 61. For me, it was about trying to plan ahead while simply not having the money to make it happen. I remember feeling hopeless. It's as if there's no more room to cut, and no matter how much I budget, I feel stuck. Story 62. I am on disability, so I have a fixed income, and honestly, it is challenging. Being on disability often makes me feel like I am not contributing to society. I grew up with a strong work ethic and started my first job at the age of 7 at the local hockey arena, along with typical tasks for kids, such as shoveling snow and mowing lawns. I worked at the hockey arena every winter for 14 years and have held many jobs since then. However, I have been on disability for almost 5 years now and have attempted to return to work twice during that time, but unfortunately, it did not work out. Not being able to contribute is significant for me and affects my mental health. Story 63. Anxiety. People with financial resources tend to worry less because many problems improve with money. If your parents have dementia, hire a caretaker. If your child is being bullied, consider enrolling them in a different private school. If your car breaks down, rent a car or buy a new one. Life is filled with significant problems that can understandably cause anxiety. Having financial resources helps immensely. Lacking enough money creates considerable anxiety. Story 64. The things of sustaining value are too expensive while luxury is cheap. I want to eat healthier, but that takes time and money, so I eat inexpensive food. Granola bars used to be a quick snack. Now they are meal substitutes. I want to have a home to call my own, but rent is so high that I can't improve my credit rating or save for a down payment. So I keep moving from one poorly maintained place to another. I would like to spend time on productive hobbies, but everything I enjoy is increasing in price and I don't have any space due to my living conditions. So I'm stuck with inexpensive streaming entertainment. I would like to buy a car that is less than a decade old, but car prices keep rising while my income remains the same, so I rely on old hand-me-downs for necessary transportation. We are being financially drained, but even the most disciplined person earning an average income or below is priced out of the most basic necessities, all of which should be affordable and abundant in a nation that has historically had the strongest economy. Story 65. I am not poor, but I am lower middle class. I grew up in poverty. As a child, I can tell you that shame was my biggest issue. I always felt so much shame. Now as an adult, being lower middle class brings the stress of knowing you are just a paycheck away from financial trouble. When you start to build savings, one major expense can wipe it out. By major expense, I mean mostly medical bills. My wife had thyroid surgery, and I used our savings to pay for the deductible. It's frustrating. Story 66. When I was poor, the biggest obstacle to escaping poverty was poverty itself. School costs time and money. A flat tire could be ruinous because if you miss work, you are poorer for it, and most jobs do not provide paid time off. Many have rules that prevent you from missing shifts without notice. At one place I worked, they literally said we are all tires on a machine, and if you get a flat tire, you do not fix it, you just replace the flat tire. Another place said we are all gears, and any gear that is not turning gets fired. Turnover year after year was approximately 75%. At my current office job, they treat us very well. There is that saying about the rich man's boots lasting longer, but there is more nuance than that. When I was poor, my job required me to bring a lunch. My current company provides free lunches and snacks, so I spend less money on necessities because those are provided. Story 67. Making ends meet while facing the difficult choice between food, rent, or gas to get to work is challenging. Selling psychiatric medications to afford other medications for physical ailments can exacerbate mental health issues. Anxiety persists even during sleep, affecting one's sense of calm. Story 68. It's amusing, but I meet with a group of people for coffee once a week at McDonald's. I never consider them as rich or poor. We have great conversations. Reflecting on them now because of this discussion, I realize that many of them are financially struggling. Story 69. This thread is making me think. Poverty is about cultural differences. I never saw it that way before. Thank you for the thoughtful conversation. Story 70. Figuring out which utility you care more about. Would you rather keep your gas on or your electricity? Putting back food that actually looks edible and opting for the cheap stuff that is hard to eat. Swallowing your pride and going to soup kitchens even though you work 2 jobs 5 days a week but still can't afford bills, rent, and groceries. Living off scraps that have passed their sell-by date. Taking those home and eating them instead of throwing them out. Feeling anxious every time something even mildly expensive breaks and needs replacing. I can go on and on. While going through all that, you see teenagers and young adults who have never worked an honest day in their lives pulling out wads of cash and then getting mad at me when I don't have enough money in my drawer to break 100 when they try to buy a drink that costs a few dollars with a $100 bill. Story 71. The lack of opportunities is significant. Living in a rural area of Romania, my parents are not working, and most of our income comes from scholarships and welfare. My dad sometimes does construction work, which pays well, but it is infrequent. I am currently in the 12th grade and considered one of the more intelligent students. It is frustrating. I have been told repeatedly since childhood to study, and I now realize that, due to the limited opportunities and the traditional mindset of my parents, I may not be able to attend a prestigious college, even if I achieve excellent grades. It seems likely that I will have to settle for the nearest college, which is disappointing. I might postpone college for a year to work as a barista to save money and gain independence. Story 72. Constantly feeling behind, overanalyzing and calculating finances, planning grocery trips, and having to plan meals or eat the same meal multiple days in a row to save money. Story 73. Healthy food is very expensive now. If you are below a certain income level, you may feel you have no option but to eat poorly. Story 74. The struggle for survival. If you find it difficult to eat, obtain medicine, or even have a roof over your head, you have few options other than to work every waking hour to try to support yourself. Story 75. The system is designed to make you fail. It only takes one mistake to erase years of progress, and any mistake will be held against you for the rest of your life or the next 10 years. Story 76. The hours are 24 hours a day, and you need a place to eat, sleep, and shower. It feels like a disease as you accept less and less because you receive less and less. You navigate social programs while jobs seem to be non-existent. You move from place to place, trying to keep your phone charged in case work becomes available. For more insight, consider looking up stories about individuals living under bridges. Story 77. I take care of bills and rent first, then buy groceries in bulk. Only after that do I treat myself to a restaurant visit or two. The worst part is always wondering where my next meal will come from on such a limited budget. Story 78. The boredom of not being able to pursue any hobbies due to the financial investment required can be overwhelming. Everything requires money. Even free activities like hiking, visiting the library, or people watching eventually involve costs, such as hiking boots, sunglasses, and hats. Story 79. Poor nutrition and the inability to afford basic physical and mental maintenance lead to poorer health and a shorter, more painful life. Story 80. The stress of everything is worsened by food insecurity and malnutrition. Not long ago, I was in tears every day about it. Story 81. The number of people who truly believe that with just one money-saving trick, you will magically escape poverty. Story 82. When the people around you are engaged in amazing experiences with their money, it can be difficult not to feel a sense of longing. I'm not jealous of them. I just wish I could participate in those activities, attend fun events, or explore the world. Story 83. I didn't grow up poor, but I was definitely not well off compared to others around me. As a child, I often felt like an outsider, wondering why everyone else had things that I did not. While you gain understanding as you grow older, back then, I was just a confused child who didn't comprehend the struggles surrounding me. Story 84. Having been homeless, I have heard how people talk about those who are homeless. Having gone hungry so my child could eat, I was complimented for losing weight. I stay home to take care of my child because I cannot afford childcare on two incomes, yet I am shamed for not working. When I receive government support, I am labeled as lazy or undeserving and told to get a job. When I receive support from family, I am seen as giving up my independence and viewed as a spoiled rich kid. You cannot win. Every day is a decision about how much pride you are willing to set aside to survive. Whether it's eating plain macaroni, standing for 2 hours in the sun in a food bank line, or paying with a women, infants, and children check. Story 85. Poverty is living at the bottom of a hole with wealthy individuals at the top telling you how easy it is to climb out. Story 86. The lack of discipline can haunt you far more than being short on money. Being poor often results from a series of poor decisions, a lack of willpower, discipline, and an unwillingness to persevere, regardless of the circumstances. Story 87. It is the constant mental load of doing math at the grocery store, stressing over every bill, and pretending you are okay when you are actually stretched thin. It is exhausting not just physically, but emotionally as well. Story 88. We are often blamed for not voting for Trump. Many Americans have no idea how significant the numbers are and how difficult our lives have become. Story 89. Even if you escape from it, there is a lingering fear that if you have to return, you might not be able to handle it anymore. When I was younger, it was just the way things were. I never knew it any other way. However, today I am not as resilient as I was back then, and I do not want to be that person again. Story 90. You are trapped as a hostage. That is what makes being poor difficult. All you have to do is hold a wealthy person hostage, and it is still the same as being poor, just with better possessions. Story 91. When you want something, whether it is food or other items, and you know you cannot afford to buy it at that time. Story 92. The worst part is watching how everyone else moves forward with their lives while you feel trapped, knowing you'll never be able to afford living among them. Story 93. The worst part isn't what you don't have. It's the fear that you're one bad incident away from not even being able to keep what little you do have. Story 94. The constant mental stress of trying to figure out how to keep the lights on and food on the table was overwhelming. I served in the military and had a child, which often made me feel like I was a terrible parent. Fortunately, those times are behind me. Now, I could stop working today and be fine for the rest of my life. It really makes you appreciate what you have now. I currently have more bathrooms than I had total rooms in the apartment where I grew up. Story 95. The constant wondering if you will be able to eat today, the endless stress of barely making it from paycheck to paycheck, and not being able to buy gifts for the ones you love. Story 96. The simple pleasures we have at our fingertips are often deprived from us daily because we can't spend the money. Today, I went out and prepared some of the areas where I want to plant seeds around my property. I had to use a shovel, as it wasn't worth buying a sturdy rake to do it much more efficiently in a fraction of the time. These everyday concessions are made not because appropriate tools are hard to find, but because the person who pays me chooses to take in more than all of his employees make collectively instead of compensating us adequately for the cost of living. In my case, I guess it's the spite. Significant life improvements are available to everyone but are often obstructed by those who need them the least. The saddest thought is what we could achieve if we weren't spending most of our energy working against one another. Story 97. It's costly to be poor. I grew up in poverty, and now that my spouse and I have a good income, it's enlightening. Having extra funds allows us to invest, whether in real estate or by utilizing our time effectively. Story 98. Being hopeless. Never spending even a cent on something enjoyable can lead to feelings of guilt. People are not meant to spend all their free time sitting at home. It feels as though the world is locked up when you don't have any money. Story 99. Honestly, the other individuals facing hardships. The material conditions really pale in comparison to the predatory, parasitic, or disruptive behavior you constantly have to navigate from your peers. Story 100. Being sick or injured and unable to do anything about it. Facing death because you can't afford to take a day off from work or the cost for cancer screenings. Story 101. Paying by debit card for some deodorant costing $3 and having the purchase declined because I don't even have $3 in my account. Just not being able to afford things while surrounded by people who post their outings on social media. Skipping meals, feeling hungry, and not sleeping due to financial stress. Wondering how long I can live with a roof over my head and how everything will eventually be lost. Every purchase is determined by its usefulness, the nutrients it provides, and the amount of work I must do to cover its cost. For example, if something costs $20, that equals 1 hour and 10 minutes of my working time. Selling belongings to earn money. Walking everywhere because even the city bus costs $4. The thought that this is my everyday reality and the future feels empty. Story 102. One of the best financial realizations I ever had was when a friend explained their perspective on budgeting. You have to pay for your past self, your current self, and your future self. Past self represents debt. Current self refers to what we typically think of as monthly budgeting, and future self pertains to investing for retirement. I grew up poor and was not well off for most of my adult life until I graduated college at 32. I never even had the ability to think about any version of myself except for my current self. If I hadn't entered a career that has now made me middle class and financially comfortable, I don't think I would have ever had the opportunity to address my past self and plan for my future self. Story 103. It's tough, but I believe the worst feeling is being stuck. Like you're working hard but can't catch a break to get ahead. It's exhausting. What do you think? Story 104. One of the challenges is wishing you could spend more time with your friends and family but feeling unable to take any time off. When all your mental energy and time go to making ends meet by working long hours for low pay, it leaves very little time to focus on improving your life while also managing household responsibilities, especially when the path forward is unclear. Story 105. There is no nobility in poverty. Poverty degrades and humiliates a person, killing their sense of self-esteem. It is an illness that robs you and makes you feel inadequate. Surviving means constantly worrying about what to have for dinner, feeling the pain of hunger. Poverty breeds inequality, crime, and corruption. Living in poverty feels like a part of you dies each day, making you feel subhuman and defeated. Story 106. I'm hungry right now, not because I don't have food at home, but because I'm afraid of how long that food will last. This morning, all I had for breakfast was an apple. Yesterday, all I had to eat was 2 slices of pizza that my cousin bought and a ham and cheese sandwich. I can't afford to buy more food because I have debt I'm trying to pay off, and it costs 1/5 of my paycheck just to get to work. Story 107. Not having any money is quite evident. Being hungry is certainly unpleasant. Additionally, not being able to secure a job because the employer requires a credit score and yours is poor limits your options. As a result, you are compelled to take manual labor jobs, which do not provide sufficient income to cover rent. Story 108. I am not poor, but when my husband bought a trailer home for his deer camp, he was shocked. Firstly, he couldn't believe he had just purchased it because the financing is quite lucrative for the sellers. Then he mentioned there were many strange fees added on and he walked out. They removed the fees after that. My husband said that individuals without financial experience likely get taken advantage of in a negative way. This is not to imply that those individuals are unaware, but the way the fees were added so casually seemed unfair. It is expensive to be poor. Story 109. Working hard for 98% of your paycheck to already be accounted for. If you divide what you keep by the hours worked, you're earning very little. Story 110. People may discredit you simply because you don't have money or success. You could be completely right, but billionaires often hold more valuable opinions. Story 111. Even if you receive some extra money, You hesitate to spend it on enjoyable activities because you may need it later. Story 112. Beyond the obvious challenge of affording the most basic things, it is emotionally and mentally exhausting. Hearing and seeing people live their daily lives, going out and having fun, dining out, traveling, buying new cars and the latest gadgets, while you struggle to make ends meet weighs heavily on you. Over time, you adjust to it. However, being poor has taught me to budget every dollar and live within my means. It has led me to be creative and not wasteful. When something breaks, instead of throwing it out, I fix it. I buy used clothes, which saves money, and I purchase and cook inexpensive off-brand food. You learn how to utilize and make the best of what you have, which, in turn, helps you appreciate what you possess more than simply replacing something because you can afford to. Story 113. You probably notice it more at school rather than in adulthood, but being able to wear nice, clean, new clothes all the time is important. Story 114. I feel guilty every time I spend money, even on food. I see other people spending money freely on things as if it is nothing. Even when I have more money one month, I can't spend it without feeling that I should try to save as much as I can. Story 115. I cannot fix my teeth and often go weeks with tooth pain until my nerves die down because I cannot afford dental care. Story 116. Boredom prevents me from leaving the house without spending money. I also cannot buy supplies for activities at home without incurring expenses. Story 117. It is monotonous. You wear the same clothes and eat the same food repeatedly. There are no holidays, no outings, and no new experiences. Story 118. How expensive it is. Late fees, overdrafts, and reconnection fees. You make one mistake, and you're affected for the next 6 months. Story 119. 1. Not being able to afford things for your children that would be beneficial for them or even spoil them occasionally. Not being able to do things that others take for granted, such as going to a movie, buying new shoes or clothes, or grocery shopping freely. When there is a serious need for something like new prescription glasses, braces, arch supports, medicine, or tutoring for a learning disability, we cannot afford it. As a woman, wearing hand-me-downs from someone who does not share the same personality and body structure as you. Story 120. Every time I go out to start my truck before work, I hold my breath and pray it starts. Any odd sound it makes me panic because I have only $2 in the bank. My credit cards are past due, and if I miss one day of work, I will be living on the street. Even when I try to stop worrying about everything, I end up worrying again. It's constant pressure, just like everyone else says. Story 121. You have to be careful about how you spend money. It is exhausting. Grocery shopping takes an entire afternoon. Everything requires careful planning. Story 122. People who have even slightly more than you often find it difficult to understand why you are the way you are. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.